functionally we have a quest system, but functionally that doesn't matter until we can actually display our current quest. So I think it's high time that we look into setting up some widgets that can display our current quests and our progress in those quests. This isn't going to be too complicated, but it's going to require quite a bit of setup, so let's dive right into it. As per usual, you can get the project files to either this part or the entire completed project for the entire series down below in the description for patrons and YouTube members. So first we need a place that we're going to be storing our quest progress in. And you can do that just on your character itself. That is entirely a valid way to do it. You can do it on a game instance if you prefer. It kind of depends on if you're going to be moving between levels a lot. Doing it in a game instance, which is persistent, might be a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm going to set it up in a game instance, but if in your case you prefer doing it on like the Blueprint character or maybe anywhere else that might suit you a little bit better, do feel free to fill it in however you like. But for us, we're going to do it in the game instance. We look for more actors and then we go for game instance and we'll call that something like BP Quest GI. Do be sure to go up into your project settings though, look for game instance and change your game instance class to our BP game instance that we just made. So now that we have that, we can make an array of all the quests that we're going to work with. But for that, we're going to need to make the type of variable that this array is going to be first. And that is going to be a custom struct. So let's go in here into our blueprint and make our structure. We'll call this quest task status display. We're specifically calling this one display because we're going to be making a version of this as well that is more geared toward saving the data. This is only meant to display, so it's going to be using things like text. When we end up saving this data, we're going to be saving it as a more machine-friendly format instead of a human-friendly format. So for now, let's open this up. And this is going to have a couple of different things. First and foremost, obviously, it's going to have the quest name, because we need to be able to display what name this quest has. It's going to be a text. Then I also like to add in the quest ID, which is going to be a GUID. Because as I mentioned in the previous video, you can iterate over all of the quests in progress and just check their name. If you have any quests that are the same name, that might lead to results that are less than ideal. It's also just slower because you're not even just checking two strings against each other, which in and of itself is slow. You're also using a text, which needs to look up the proper string based on your language settings. And while that doesn't make it super slow compared to a normal string compare, it's yet another thing that it needs to do. GUIDs are just comparing two numbers and that's it. So it's nice to have that for comparison reasons. And then we have our task status, and that's going to be our quest objective type that we made. That's the basic object that we made in the very first video. Let's actually call this objective status as well, because I did promise you to be a little bit more descriptive with the difference between tasks and objectives, and this is going to be an array. Because every single quest is going to potentially have a variable near endless amount of different tasks to it. So this is going to be the structure that's going to hold our entire quest progress. So going back into our game instance for that, we can now make our quest progress. This is going to hold all the quests that are currently active with how much progress they have. If a quest is finished, we're going to remove it from this array as well. You don't necessarily need to. You can just keep it in there if you really want to, but the array will start becoming longer and longer and longer for something that you're not actually interacting with anymore, which is going to make looping over it a lot more intensive. So we're going to be removing it after we finish any given quest. And this is going to be of type quest task status display, and we're going to make that into an array. So now, whenever we create a new quest, we're going to be adding it to this, and then when we ever create a new task in that quest, we're going to find the quest that it belongs to and add it to the array for that specific quest. So we need to go back into some blueprints that we already worked in to figure this out. So let's just open up our quest tree here. And the very first thing is in our root, we have that quest manager that we made kind of as an aside last time. We're going to be adding a lot more code to it now, because when we enter this state, we're going to create an entry within that array that we just made. So let's add the enter state here, and we're going to get our game instance, and we will cast that to our BP game instance. And for ease of future use, we're going to just promote this to a variable so that we can easily access it from a bunch of different places in our blueprint graph, because we're going to be accessing this quite a lot. And with that, we will get our quest progress array. Now, you might initially just want to add to this, and you can split the structure pin, provide in the quest name and the quest ID, and just leave the objective status as blank. That is entirely a valid way to do things for now. But what if you make this quest from a save file where you already have a handful of these objectives completed? So we're going to set this up in a way that's going to make setting up the save files later down the line a lot easier, because it won't need a bunch of reworks. But it's going to make this slightly more complex for the time being, because what we're going to do is we're going to for each loop over our array of current progress. We'll split the structure pin, and we're going to be comparing whether or not the quest ID is equal to the quest ID that we're going to give this quest itself, for which we need to promote this to a variable. So let's call this quest ID and expose that so that we can add it in the actual quest tree itself in a moment. And we find that it already exists in this array. We don't want to add it a second time. And we can't simply check whether or not the exact struct matches, because if it had like different completion data in it, it doesn't technically match the entire struct. So we need to loop over it and check, hey, is this quest ID an ID that we're already like in progress in any way, shape or form? If it is, we're going to make a new variable here for quest already exists, and we'll just set that to being true. Then once we've looped over the entire thing to make sure that it doesn't exist anywhere in the already existing array, we'll simply check, hey, did we, while looping over that entire thing, find if this quest already exists? Because if it does, we can just simply do nothing, or we can finish this task, because obviously then we don't want to actually like start the quest like at all. For now, we're just going to do nothing, and only if this is false, so if it doesn't already have this quest, are we going to get our quest progress, and then we will add a new quest to that array. And I'm going to just add a rerouting node here real quick to make things look a little less messy. So let's split the structure pin now. We'll put in the quest ID that we made before here that we were checking against, and then we'll also promote this quest name to a variable. I like to put this as an input though, so quest name, because this is potentially going to be used in other tasks as well. So that's indeed going to be a text, and we'll call this a input category. So it's going to be required to give this quest a name value, just because we're going to be binding this to a parameter, because other things are also going to be using that parameter. The objective status is going to be entirely blank, because obviously we only need to create this entry for this quest in the array. Then we're going to be finding it again in a moment in the actual objective manager, and that is going to be adding things to this array instead. So this is the adding part of showing our quests. So let's actually put that up top, because that is a state enter. On state exit, we at this point just check, hey, do we have a next quest to start? If so, start it. But now we also need to go back in, find this array, find the corresponding quest, and remove it again. Because if this quest is finished, we don't want it to be in that array anymore. So once again, we get our game instance, and we get our like quest progress just the same. So get progress. We'll put this to the side for now, and we will for each loop over that. And we'll just kind of do the same thing. We'll split the structure pin, we'll get our quest ID, and we'll just check every quest ID in this array against the quest ID for this specific quest. Put the other code to the side a little bit more even. And if it's found it, which it eventually will, because it will be in this array, that's what this code makes sure of, when it finds that quest ID, it's going to remove it from this array. So we remove a specific index, and it's going to be the array index from our for each loop. Now, if you want to be like super sure about this, not like needlessly looping over a long array, you can actually make this a for each loop with break instead. And then after you've removed it, you can break out of it so that it doesn't loop over the rest of the array needlessly, because you've already found what you're looking for. So let's actually just do that. Split structure pin. We're going to be putting this into there, and that lets us delete the original for each loop. Put in a couple of like reroute nodes to make it look a little bit less messy. This is with C++ just kind of is nice because you don't have these lines all over the place crossing over each other, but hey. And that's what we're going to be doing on state exit instead. And once all that is complete, we can do the code that we did before, which starts the next quest, if at all relevant. So that's the quest manager side of things. But now I want to go into the objective manager and also make that add everything that it needs to add. So going back into our tree here, picking one of our objectives and just finding the objective manager to go edit that. When we enter this, we're going to need to do a little bit more again. So here we are already looping over the objectives and we're binding them. But after that, what we need to do is we need to get game instance again. So we can probably do the get game instance and setting that to a variable before the for each loop, so we're not actually getting that over and over again, because that's going to remain the same. So get game instance, cast it to our BP game instance. You could make a blueprint function library function to just get this a little bit easier so that you don't have to like repeat doing this every single time. But for now, we'll just like promote this to a variable. So now that we have that game instance, after we complete this first for each loop, so after we've done like all this binding, what we're going to do is we're going to do another for each loop. So we'll get our BP game instance and then get that progress array that we made, and we're going to be for each looping over that. So for each loop here. I guess this could be a for each loop with break again, just to save a couple of loops if at all possible. And here we're going to, again, split structure pin, and we'll check if our quest ID is equal to, and we'll promote that to a variable again. So quest ID. Make sure to mark that as category input again, because this is super important to actually provide in. And if we have found that, we're going to move on with this rest of the code, where we're going to get all of our objectives, and we're going to for each loop over all those objectives, and add them into this array that we have on our other array. So we get this array and we add to it in this other for each loop the object that we're working with here. And that's really all there is to it. So what this is going to do is it's going to try to find the quest corresponding to our quest ID. Once it's found that, it's just going to get all the objects that this manager manages and add them to the quest progress itself. Now, because these are all objects, quickly going in here during the editing, instead of using this array and adding to it directly, that doesn't quite work because these are technically copies of whatever is in this array. What you need to do is you need to pull off of this and get a reference to a specific index, which you can get through this array index instead. Then if we break that reference, and we add to this array in this reference instead, everything will work because it'll actually be adding it to the array in here instead of a copied value that the for each loop uses. Whenever any of these objects like update themselves when they have been completed, this array is going to immediately be able to like reflect that and have all that up-to-date information. This is why we're doing it object-based instead of making a bunch of structs, because then you need to go like all over the place and update every struct and everything updates, and it's just a mess. So that's what these like basic U objects really come in handy for. And then once that is completed, I guess we can break out of this for each loop, because once we found the quest, there's only going to be one of this quest in that array. We ensured that before. So now we'll have a proper list of all the currently active quests with their objectives. So let's make a widget for that, shall we? That's going to be the easy part of this. So we can just go user interface, make a widget blueprint, and I'll call this WBP quest entry. In that, I'm going to put a size box to hold everything. I'm going to real quick set this to desired, just so that we can see how big everything actually is. Personally, I like to then just go in with override like 500. Your mileage may vary as to like what size you want this to be, of course. In there, we add in our vertical box. We'll be stacking a couple of things on top of each other. The first thing will be a text. That's going to be the name of the quest. And then I will put in a horizontal box below that, which is going to have a spacer and another vertical box. So here we can see if we give this spacer a bit of padding to like the right, let's say 50 units, this vertical box is going to be offset a little bit, so we'll be able to add text to this. It'll be offset and it'll look a little bit nicer that way. Now, this vertical box is going to need to be a variable as well, because we're going to be dynamically adding to it. And that's about everything we have going for us right here. So let's go into the event graph for this and set up what we need to set up. On event construct, of course, the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that this is also set to variable, the quest name, because we're going to be setting that dynamically as well, obviously. We set the text for it to being whatever it needs to be. So for this, we're going to take in a variable, and that's going to be the quest progress. And it's going to be of type quest task status display, the structure that we made for this. This one was set to instance editable and also expose it on spawn. When we create one of these, we want to just give in all of the data to display for this quest, which will, in fact, include its name. So we'll use that to populate the name here. Then we'll have this array of its objectives. So we can just for each loop over those. And for each one of the objectives, we will construct a object from class, and what we're going to be constructing will be a text. So this is one of the things that you can create within the widget blueprints. But if you just try to create a widget, the like base objects for it, like text and that kind of stuff, like rich text block, it's another one that we see here, you can't actually create with the create widget node. So you need to use the construct object node, where you can construct a text. I'll show you real quick just to prove that with create widgets. If I try to find the text, it's not going to let me. But doing this is exactly the same as creating one of these text blocks just from within the UI. So we can use the set text on this as well. And we're going to be getting from the array element, get the name for the objective. And then I also like to set the color and opacity for these. So if it's already finished, it'll be a little bit grayed out. We can use a select node for that. We'll get the array element again and get whether or not the task is finished, because again, it's just an array of objects, so we can very easily get the currently most up-to-date value for that. Put that into the index for the select node, and then we can just make a slate color for if it is not finished, which is in this case, we're just going to make that white. And if it is finished, we're going to make that like more of a dull gray. And then at the very end here, we'll get our vertical box and add a child to it. And the child that we're going to be adding will be this. Now, I want to point out one thing. In the previous quest series that I did, which again is a bit more complex in a lot of ways, we made everything so that it would dynamically show whenever I completed an objective, it would update the UI for it as well. This is not going to do that. What this is going to do is it's going to create a UI for you that shows you the current state as you open it. So this would be something that you put in like a pause menu, because while you're in that pause menu, you're never going to be finishing quests, so this doesn't need to update in real time. If you want to update something in real time, it's going to get a little bit more complex, because now this widget itself is going to need to also like assign to objective finished and then update itself. You can do that. We're not going to go through that right now, because realistically, you're going to put this in like a pause menu in some kind of like quest book tab anyway. Now we have something that can show a quest with all of its sub-objectives fairly easily. So now all we need to do is make another widget that instances a bunch of these based on how many quests we currently have active. So make another user interface, widget blueprints. Going to call that WBP quest book. And this one is going to be even more simple, so don't worry about it. What we're going to do is, because this is going to be one that we directly add to the viewport, I'm going to start with a canvas panel. And within that, I'm going to put a border, and I'm going to just set its anchors to be screen filled. And the offset will be 0, 0 for everything, and then we'll set the offset left to like 200. From the right also it's going to be 200, and then from the top and the bottom it's going to be like 500, or maybe maybe a little bit less. Maybe switch that around actually. Maybe make this 500 and I'll make these 200. Pretty good. So left and right are going to be higher numbers, and then top and bottom are going to be like slightly slower numbers. So we get this kind of square. Maybe even make this like 350 instead, so that's a little bit wider. You can do whatever you want with this. This is of course just a quick little like example widget. I like to set the brush color itself to being black with then an alpha of about 50%. And then within this, we're going to be adding a vertical box. And then just to be sure, I also am going to add within a vertical box a scroll box, because we're going to be adding things to the point where maybe they don't all fit within this one screen. So this scroll box is what we're going to be setting to is a variable. On event construct, we can pull in our scroll box, start out with clearing the children just in case anything was already in there, because we're going to be adding and removing this to the screen, and every time we add it back to the screen, it'll run event construct. So if you don't do this, it'll start adding the same quests over and over and over. From here, we very simply do a get game instance without having it pulled off of this node like I was just doing there. We do get game instance, we cast that to the BP game instance, we get our progress array, we for each loop over that progress array, and for each one of those we're gonna get our scroll box and we're gonna add a child to it. The child that we'll add to it will be a create widgets. And that'll be our quest viewer widget that we just made, so our quest entry, which needs a quest progress struct, but wouldn't you know it, we do have that from our for each loop. And then we just provide that into the add child, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So now on our third person character, we can just make one on begin play, and then just make a key to like make it appear and disappear. As easy as that. So let's make a begin play event, create a widget, which is going to be our quest book. We'll promote it to a variable, call that quest book, and then we'll make a debug key on queue. Obviously, if you make an actual game, this would be an input action, but I'm not going to set up an entire input action for this right now. When we press this, we simply flip-flop between adding it to the viewport on A, and then remove from parent on B. So now let's go back into our state tree and actually start setting up the proper values with all the names and stuff, because we do need to do that, obviously. The root itself is going to need to have a quest name that it takes in. So let's make that a parameter here. Let's call that, let's make it a text and rename that to quest name. Your first quest. In the quest manager, we can just simply reference that to there. Now, these are all going to need quest and task IDs now as well. The task IDs aren't really relevant yet, but the quest ID will become relevant. So you can put this in as a parameter, or maybe even host this on like the quest giver actor blueprint. But if you haven't generated this yet, you just press this little drop-down menu, you generate, and it generates a unique ID for you, which you can then access from anywhere in here. So let's go into our objective manager for this. Quest ID is going to be our quest manager quest ID for this one as well. I guess we haven't set up the single objectives to like work with this yet. So that's a little bit of a downside to we have the single objectives set up. I personally just think that using a quest manager with a single objective is going to be easier than making the single objectives also like report themselves back to like the displaying and saving systems as well. But if you wanted to, instead of doing all that we did in the quest manager, you can very much do that in the create basic quest objective and then just like add itself to this and make this one take in the quest ID. The annoying part about that is now you have to provide in that quest ID for every single one of your objectives, and there's no real good way to automate that. So I personally prefer putting that in the manager because you're only going to have one manager per state. So changing this around now to replacing this with or adding in rather, a manager and not using this is single objective and instead just doing it like this way in general is going to be a bit easier and less of a headache. So I'm going to personally go back in and get rid of the is single objective setup because I think it's kind of not a great way to do things to begin with. But now we do have a quest ID. So, and now you'll see I have no quests. I run over this one, and now I have my first quest, which has walk to location and walk to location 2. So again, if I just do this while this thing is up, it's not going to update, but if I remove it and re-add it, you can see it's now marked walk to location as being finished. Now, if I do this other one, you see, hey, we now have our new objectives unlocked, which again is just walk to location number 1. Now that that quest is completed, it'll be gone from the list, and it says your first quest again, because it is a quest with the exact same name. Again, we have this entire like quest set up twice. Quest number 2 used the same tree. At this point, you can see why that's a very niche use case. I wanted to show that you could do that, but you probably shouldn't. So we're just going to copy over this quest instead, and we're going to do quest number 2. I guess you can set the quest name itself as a parameter as well, and you could technically make every single task name a parameter and reuse quests in that way if you wanted to. I think it's just easier to do all that within the trees, but it's flexible enough to the point where you can set it up however you personally like. So let's make it so that this second quest is the second set of objectives maybe. So instead of doing this going to the next state, on transition what we'll do is we will complete this tree, so tree success. And that's then going to start this one, which is going to be just walk to location. And we'll call this again. And the name for this will be your second quest. So we'll see, nothing, your first quests, we'll do the first quests, we get a reward, and now we have your second quest, walk to location. And once we complete that, apparently that's the wrong one. We need to do it at that one. No, it's bound to one of these then maybe. Surely one of these. It's bound to this one. Okay. So we have a displaying method now for our quests, our progress, and everything of the sort. The one thing that we don't yet have is the ability to save between play sessions. Because if I now go back in again, I can restart this quest because we haven't done this quest yet. We don't have anything saved. So next time what we're going to be doing is we're going to use all of this setup that we have now, and we're going to do something very similar to like gathering up all that data for displaying, but instead we're going to be gathering up slightly different, slightly more machine-friendly data to save it. And then of course also to load it. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. And of course, an extra massive thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sergey Thomas and Mauricio Farias. And my Cave Student tier supporters, Oiku and Earl Monsville Urno.